I mean, one of the things that I've been seeing is that if I'm looking into something, I have to read 3 paragraphs before I know whether it's crap or not. And that's 3 paragraphs of my life I'll never get back. and so we see that in so many other well, and maybe with the sort of the hyper specialization too. It takes you time to determine whether it fits your hyper specialization or not. There's another hand. Yeah, Fran.
I was going to say that I think one of the things that's very positive about social networking is that it levels the playing field of the conversation. That anyone can put in a good point. It doesn't need to be someone who is a renowned expert in such and such a thing. The local guy next door could have something very deep to say and be heard in the forum, which is everything. So I think there's a new way to discover new voices. I think there's a new way to, for people who wouldn't necessarily want to come forward and participate in the conversation, find their end.
And there's a session I was just at also made mention of the number of books that came from blogs that have been turned right into books, and that's some of those people are people who would not have been able to get that book published in any other way. And Shit My Dad Says is now a TV show, and it was just started off sort of as a lark, and has become this big thing. It doesn't mean that there's anything really intrinsically valuable with that particular one, but yeah, it does mean that it is democratizing. But that is also part of the problem, because then you have 7 billion people, all who have the same megaphone. That's true. That is very true. Yeah.
But I think there's still a need for some way to distinguish authority from unauthority.
Right. Well, and nuance is much more complicated than a good quip. And nuance is part of what I'm afraid. Intellectual nuance is part of what I'm afraid will not be devalued, but be more difficult to find and to locate.
Have to reduce to 144 characters.
Simple.
Using an analogy, publishing information, and food. And I think there's a hyperabundance of bad food and fast food nation, and now we're seeing, and then there's that kind of pre-nostalgia, we really want to get back to the earth, and we want to can, and we want to grow chickens in the backyard, and actually now we are. And so, I have a little bit of a vision that 2015 will follow a bit of this American food crash. We're going to get away from the crap and go back to...
So we're going to start right here, the slow information movement, the slow content. The slow content, I like that. Yeah, that's right. Slow content, I like it. Yeah, sure.
One of my concerns with hyperabundance is the death of serendipity. I was just at the Publisher-Driven Access seminar downstairs, and they were talking, Arizona was there, and they were talking about what Kansas was doing in their libraries. And I think we all heard about what happened at Syracuse, reducing the amount of books that they're keeping in their libraries to make room for students and for doing some digital research. But in doing that, they dismissed the value of serendipity and the browsing experience. And if we're going to instead replace serendipity with popularity, are we really serving research? Are we really serving scholarship? And that's one of my concerns.
Right.
Yeah, it's always been the problem with the web, is that authority is popularity. And
Right,
like I said before, it's the American Idol model.
Right, yeah. It wasn't me. It was somebody else who was witty.
Should have been you.
Yeah. Well,
But I think that's why people have turned to self-editing. And there's a book by Isaac Asimov that I've always admired, where there's an entire planet called Solaria, where they've become so isolated they abhor the human touch. And I can actually see that happening. I can see that as a remote possibility, where we just sit in front of our devices.
And have virtual experiences. Yeah. Well, and this is, I came back from one of the Web 2.0 conferences sort of panicked about all of us living in a virtual world while the real world collapses environmentally, you know, because we don't have to pay attention to climate change because we're living in the avatar world, not the avatar of the movie, but my avatar is living in a much more lush social environmental ecosystem than the real world is, and that's one way that well, anyway, I came back very, very worried about that because of the big money, because the big money is pushing for virtual lives and for all of us to be living in games most of the time and spending 8 hours at a time, not in the real world and not touching the grass and not really being part of that. Yeah, interesting. So we got sort of off track with my original plan, but that's fine. Are there other thoughts? Yeah.
One more thought. Let's push this to 2020, and you'll have a whole new generation of young kids coming into the responsible part of their beginning of the responsible part of their lives, and they're already growing up now with this hyperactivity, and they're going to deal with a lot of it, and maybe with some evolutionary process that goes on, and we're just getting old. You know?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
They new, and then they learn how to filter it out, and some of them they need some of that extra noise
Yep.
to concentrate themselves.
Well, maybe, and we were talking about white noise before. White noise is different than purposeful noise, and
yeah. They're used to it, and we didn't grow up like that.
right.
And then we have another responsibility of pushing that authoritative scholarly work down to them and that connection.
Mm-hmm.
It's been the same problem for 100 years too.
Well, and you know, Socrates or Plato. Was it Plato who was talking about the kids these days? You know, yeah, right, yeah. And so to some extent, it is the same old thing that we've always been fighting against, but it's just so much more purified now, and so it's sort of like it's easier to become an alcoholic if you've got access to vodka than if all you ever drink is mead, you know. So the distillation of expertise and distillation of being expert at grabbing our attention may make it a bit more concerning. Yeah.
It can be like one of the tasks of a parent to help your child learn how to sustain their attention span by reading a long book together, or
Mm-hmm.
has an idea about having to sit through church for an hour a little without moving.
Right.
It's kind of tasks that if they're always on their games or their computer and they're jumping from one thing to another, I mean, I see myself, and so
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be a challenge for my son to be able to sit and do one thing for an extended length of time, and that's
Yep.
what you have to do to read a monograph.
Right. And certainly we all dip into monographs. We don't necessarily sit down and read from beginning to end, but the motivation for getting your kid to sit down and really concentrate, it's really hard.